This is a 2001 Pt Cruiser with a 2.4 liter in it, and it had a problem with overheating. It has 120,000 miles on it. The first thing I did was to check and make sure the fan was running, and it was. It was pretty hot. The fan was totally capable of pulling the heat off the system if there's heat getting to the radiator, and it had a good heater in it, so it had plenty of antifreeze in it, or enough. Well, test drove it some, and the overflow was boiling over. Although the temperature gauge said it wasn't like super hot, it still got a problem. And with the infrared down underneath around the block, it was 220. So I pulled the cap off. I noticed some flow. That's the upper radiator hose inlet there. Some flow, and it had a good heater, but it really should have been flying up through there. It's been overheated a few times, so one of the things I did was take the oil cap off and check for any moisture on it. Droplets of water, or pour the oil stick. If you pull the oil stick and check and see if it's got whipped cream up it, and it didn't, surprisingly. The next thing I want to do is I've let it cool off, and it's totally overnight cold. And I'll take this radiator cap off, and the system's pretty grungy. And it's boiled some of the antifreeze out, looks like. There's a lot of trash and sediment in there, so the system needs flushed. Black looking. And the thermostat's got black debris all over it. So I'm going to take the thermostat housing loose and pull the thermostat out of it. I'm going to go ahead and drain the old antifreeze out, flush it with water, and then pour a flush in it and run it for a while, and hopefully get rid of some of the sediment. Usually when the puke tank's boiling over, the radiator's stopped up. This may or may not clean it. I'll try it and see. The first thing I'd want to do is to go underneath and take the drain plug loose on the radiator. I'll raise it up a little bit. If we run to the driver's side, stuck a jack in on the back of the control arm and frame, raise it up. Got a drain pan, catch the antifreeze in. The drain plug is on the driver's side. So I'm going to go ahead and pull slightly on that tab and turn it. Turn it in a counterclockwise position. Get the drain pan underneath this hole. Hopefully don't get a mess everywhere. Got the radiator cap off of it. You can leave the cap on it and let it drain the overflow if you want. Then take the cap off. Got the antifreeze out of it, or at least down far enough to get the thermostat out of it. Pull this overflow hose off. This is a new factory thermostat. Price range between $30 and $40. A little little more expensive than aftermarket, but well worth it because of the reliability of it and the damage that this will cause if the aftermarket one fails. The possibility for damage. And it has a bleed hole in the top of it with a ball bearing, like a floating ball bearing in it. Pay attention to its location. It is in the back. So anyway, looking at the thing straight on, it's at 1 o'clock, the bleed hole, and the thermostat will have to go back up in there with that bleed hole at 1 o'clock. I'm going to go over here and take this clamp loose on the upper radiator hose and slide it right on off of there. Just pop it up. Have a look in there. This system's particularly dirty for some reason. It's because it's no one. And then there's two 10mm bolts holding it down. One underneath of this power steering return hose and the other one in the back underneath of the injector harness, looks like. I'm going to be turning this, make sure the clamp doesn't tear up the injector plug in when this rotates. It's pretty close to it there. It's left a mark on the harness. I've taken the two 10mm bolts out of the upper part of the thermostat housing. I'll pull this power steering pump return line over a little bit. Just make sure not to distort the timing cover very much, or you'll end up with a problem there. Just lift up a little bit. Equal it out of there and get it at an angle. And there's the grungy thermostat. Be sure not to break your overflow nipple off. See the check valve for the air vents in the back there. The thermostat is really cooked. I'll go ahead and take a pair of needle nose or something and pick that out of there. It's just a big white rubber seal around it. I suppose if you wanted to, you could pull that over sideways enough to get the clamp and get a hold of the hose and get it off of there. If the housing was disturbed, warped, or busted, or you break this nipple off. A little bit of a difference in the collar from the old one being grungy. If you're just changing the thermostat, just go ahead and clean that base off. Wipe it down with a rag and then take a piece of plastic or wood and scrape the debris off of it. And stick the new thermostat in there and drop it back down. Tighten the bolts down to 110 inch-pounds. I'm going ahead and clean that off and pull the guts out of the old thermostat and stick it back in there and run a flush through this system. But if you get uptight in tight spaces trying to clean it, like I do, I just went ahead and took these 5 intake bolts up out of there. There is a hanger for the hose on the second one over from the right, and just propped it up a little bit. And you can't prop it up too much because the gut's hanging off the back like the jar valve tube. I don't want to disturb the seal and the tube on that. But I can get down there and clean that a lot easier now. Clean the trash out of it when I can. Just feel your intake seals and make sure they're sticking up and not sunk in. Just remember that this faces up and the spring part goes down into the engine block. There's a little notch right here that air bleed sits in. There's a seal to it, near it. Sits in that notch. I've cut the wax pellet plug out of this thermostat so the water will just flow free through it. I'm going to insert it back into this housing, put it back down on there, and fill this up with a flush and flush the system. I've run a piece of wire with a small hook on it to the center of this old piece, because it's going to want to fall out when I turn it upright to drop it in there. And I'll just hold up on the wire to make sure it stays in there while I flip this housing around. This is the upper hose holder. It sits on this second bolt over from the right. I'm going to leave it out till I get done pedaling with flushing it. Don't forget and leave that laying in there or get it caught under the intake. And you put the bolts back in it if you're in there that far. In order to use the flush, you need to drain all the antifreeze out of it after it's cooled off. Fill the system full of water. Start it up. Let the water circulate through the heater core for about 30 seconds. Shut it off. And drain it again. Fill it up again with water. Start it up. Let it run about 30 seconds. Shut it off. Drain it out again. I went ahead and took the lower radiator hose off. And I just slip it on and off to drain it. Now I've put the hose back on it. And the radiator drain's closed. I've poured this radiator flush into the thermostat housing first, so that you know how full the system is when you start adding water, so it won't, you can get all of it in there. If you put water in it, you don't know if it'll fill up before you add this stuff or not. So I've got that in there. I'm going to fill it up with water, then drive it for a couple of days for a few hours each day, or you can 3 or 4 days for an hour each day. It doesn't matter, as long as you get 3 or 4 hours of running on the coolant. Make sure it doesn't overheat. I'll hook the garden hose up to the overflow tank and let it push the residue in the tank out the overflow off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and fill it full of water and start it up. I'll leave the cap loose on it until it's full. And hook this reservoir hose back up. I've just started up with the flush in it. See, it's in there. Put the cap on it so it can pressurize and keep that foam a liquid. I sprayed just about up to the add mark on the water in the overflow. You want to keep the water off the timing belt cover as much as possible and out of the spark plug holes when you're flushing this out. Now it's time to take a little drive and watch, make sure it doesn't overheat. I've got the center pulled out of the thermostat, so it shouldn't. The actual thermostat surrounds go in there to restrict the flow, but the actual thermostat center is pulled out of it. We'll test drove it some with the thermostat out of it. Just the outer perimeter of the thermostat's still in it. And the overflow was boiling over. Although the temperature gauge said it wasn't like super hot, it's still got a problem. And with the infrared down underneath around the block, it was 220. So I pulled the cap off. I noticed some flow. That's the upper radiator hose inlet there. Some flow, and it had a good heater, but it really should have been flying up through there without the thermostat in, like a geyser almost. So I flushed the system. I took the lower radiator hose off and drained the water out and flushed it again. I took this upper radiator hose off and see how clean the radiator was and tried to blow through it. It's real restrictive, so the radiator stopped up on it. And as I say, looks like it's starting to leak anyway. So I'm going to put a new radiator in it.